morning, everybody. We have today our Children and Young People's panel meeting, by virtual meeting by Teams. This is the third meeting of the panel being held under virtual meeting regulations. We're using Microsoft Teams software, but the proceedings will have the same standing and validity as if they had taken place at a physical meeting at the town hall. We are streaming today's meeting on the internet, and the YouTube link has been published with the agenda. A recorded version will be available to view within 48 hours. We've already talked about using the chat function if you want to ask a question, and we have other systems in place. Could I please ask you to ensure that your audio is muted when you're not speaking to help the connectivity? And if any of you happen to be kicked out by the IT, don't worry, we will understand, and I'm sure you will try and get back in as soon as quickly. It's good for us members to have our videos on so that the members of the public, if we have any, can see us. That would be good. We've already talked about the queue system. I'm the chair, Wendy Griggs, and all non-panel members, if you'd like to also make sure that your audio is off. Right, Michelle, I think the first thing is for you to take a roll call of members.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Applin. Councillor Bridger. Councillor Bridger.
Present, Michelle.
Okay. Councillor Cherry.
Present.
Councillor Connolly.
Yep, I'm here.
Councillor Crosby.
Present.
Okay. Councillor Gregor. Councillor Griggs.
Yes, present.
Councillor Harley.
Present.
Councillor Hogg.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Holland.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Jacobs.
Present.
Yes. Councillor James.
Present.
Councillor Pilgrim.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Snadden has given apologies, and Councillor Westwood. No. We also have in attendance Councillor Hearn and Councillor Gibbons, and Kent and me from North Somerset Parent Carers Working Together, Parent Carer Forum for North Somerset, and some NHS representatives, Anne Norris and Lorraine McMullen. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to welcome everybody. Councillor Steve Bridger, who's joining us as a new panel member. I'm very pleased that Kenton is able to join us, and I hope he will be with us for future panel meetings. Very pleased to welcome our health representatives. It's very good you've been able to come. I'd also like to welcome Councillor Anne Hartley from Shropshire Council, currently chairman. She's become our peer mentor for Scrutiny for Children's Services since last year. She's been hosting or helping with our Task and Finish group, and at the end of this meeting I'm hoping she'll give me some pointers about chairing meetings, and all of us, she will be able to give me some pointers about how our scrutiny is managing to be effective. So very welcome to Anne. So moving on, any members of the public, Michelle, want to address us?
We've got no public addresses, Chairman.
No public, okay. Apologies for absence. I think you said we had
Councillor Snaden.
Councillor Snaden, yeah. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? No. Thank you.
No,
minutes
nothing.
Of nothing. Right, minutes of last meeting. Firstly,
sorry, Wendy. Sorry, beg your pardon. There's one other attendee that just made herself known in the chat. I just wondered whether we should acknowledge that. That's Heather. Are you there, Heather?
Oh, yes, I am. Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Heather Kapelich. I'm Head of Operations for CAMS at AWP.
Lovely.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Steve. Welcome, Heather. Thank you very much. Sorry that we didn't immediately spot that you had arrived. Thank you. So no declaration. So minutes of last meeting. Are we happy that they are a true record? Anybody in the chat saying no? Thank you very much. Matters arising. A lot of what's in our agenda of previous meetings we are picking up here. So I don't necessarily think there are, but Steve, anyone in the chat, Michelle, say they'd like to say anything?
No, Councillor Hogg, I think he's got his hand up.
Have I? Sorry, no. I'll put it down. Beg your pardon.
Thank you very much. So I think we're agreeing the minutes are correct and there are no matters arising. Thank you very much. Nothing referred from the council, the exec, or any other committees and panels. So here we go. Item 6, send action plan report. Now, you have received the send, or with the agenda has been the send action plan, a hefty document, and you received the LGA send review final report as well. Another really useful and interesting document. Mike Newman is our strategy and policy development manager for Children's Services. And I think Carol Ann James may also have an input here, our assistant director. But initially, over to you, Mike, to raise any key aspects you think you want to highlight.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is timely that this comes back to the panel. It's just over a year since we put our strategy and action plan into place, which has a 2-year horizon, so we're halfway through. Obviously, the last year has not been the most usual of years for lots of reasons, and progress has been challenging for those reasons too. But equally, we've got the input from the LGA, which completed in December and was reported back to us in January, which is really helpful. I think in most cases, it confirms a lot of perhaps what we've thought about how things are going. It poses some challenges too, and certainly there are areas that I think Councillor Griggs, that you and I have discussed that we don't entirely agree with in the LGA report also. So yeah, there is a real mixed bag. The report pulls out some highlights, and I think it's important to note that we have made some progress despite challenging times and despite the fact that much of our capacity has been pulled into other services. And I think it's also a chance to thank our schools for the continued work that they've done during this period, particularly the special schools. Many of our vulnerable children and young people have continued to go to school throughout the pandemic, and the schools have served them wonderfully well in sometimes very challenging circumstances. I think it's fair to say that we've got one of the highest rates of attendance during the pandemic in the Southwest, and we've also recovered sort of when we've gone back to school very much quicker than other authorities. We've got about 85% attendance in schools, which is absolutely fantastic to hear. And I think there's a vote of thanks really to them. A range of developments in the health field as well, and I'm colleagues from the CCG, Sarona and CAMS are here, so I'll let them talk about those in the next item because I'm sure they'll want to give you more detail. But we've focused also on things like our inclusion summit with schools, where we've tried to encourage mainstream schools who are working with children with additional needs to continue working with them and to sort of look at the services they can offer to prevent them escalating into more kind of complex provision, which is often not the best thing. There are also some challenges. I think it's fair to say we know that there is still a lot of demand pressure in the system. We're identifying more need. We need to understand why, and we need to understand what that means for our services going forward. We know that timescales have slipped around our education, health and care assessments. That's not surprising in some cases because obviously it's been very difficult to organise some of those, but equally we've had issues with the educational psychology capacity, which I think the panel has talked about before. Whilst that's resolved, there's obviously a backlog. We've looked at also refused assessments. Now that sounds drastic, but in terms of the DFE, that means where somebody's come to us and said, we'd like an education, health and care assessment. And we've said, actually, you don't meet the criteria for it. It's not us being sort of rationing services or anything. It's just a kind of a technical term there. We had quite high numbers of those before, but that was because we were getting a lot of inappropriate referrals where schools were sort of saying, you know, over to you, perhaps prematurely. We've worked through the Inclusion Summit, and we've worked with colleagues in the sort of early help services to improve that. Where there is a remaining issue with that is, I think a lot of people are referring to the education, health and care system when they can't get the service they perhaps feel they need from mental health services. So that's something that perhaps we can explore further in the next item too. I think, there are issues around sort of the homeschool transport, which I'm sure many of you have been involved in and picked up on. That, as Kent and I'm sure will nod vigorously at this point, has been a huge issue for us over the course of the last few months. But, you know, hopefully we're making some progress. I think the other thing, and the bit that perhaps disappoints me in my role most, is that we've not been able to progress some of our co-production plans, working particularly with children and young people to design those services. The natural place to do that is school, and schools have just been so compromised and so challenged that getting into schools to do some of that work has been really difficult, but it's certainly something we expect to get back to soon. You have the report there. You have our kind of RAG rated action plan, which takes you back to sort of January 20 and what we hope to do. And we've also included at the end some responses and some notes on the LGA's recommendations, where we've picked those up, where perhaps we differ on them, and what we propose to do. Happy to answer any questions, as I'm sure is Caroline.
I don't know whether Caroline wants to say anything.
I think the only thing I just want to clarify, in the action plan that you're looking at, it refers to a head of education partnerships. We've actually re-looked at that, and we will be recruiting an assistant director of education partnerships, because that's in train at the moment. So and there's consultation about how we kind of reform our existing education, because one of the parts of the SEND peer review you'll look at is about, was the capacity, did we have the right skills in the right place, etc. So I wanted to do that. And the other point that you might have picked up in the report, which was, I think Councillor Holly has kind of also made reference to, is about aligning all of these plans together so they don't become disparate, and that was one of the areas of challenge. I think the two areas which Mike is saying about, that when we had the annual monitor of that kind of working action plan that we had to create this newer one, was about pace. That the pace, which is what the SEND peer review said, we weren't quite to where we need to be. We recognised that some time ago, and there's already been a lot of work. We didn't need the peer review to tell us that. We knew that, and work was in plan. And I think the second one was about aligning things and joining things up. So we've done that. I think the last thing I just want to point out is the issue about the range of EHC plans, the demand and elected home education is some of the other areas. You will see central government, Children's Commissioner, the Association of Directors of Children's Services are all having conversations with central government saying we need to address this nationally. This is not just a North Somerset issue. So that's the only additionality I'd want to add.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. I have some questions, Mike, that were asked earlier. I think Hugh James, Councillor Hugh, you want to ask something about the home to school transport that you mentioned, Mike. So over to you, Hugh.
Yeah, just it was useful to hear a small update from yourself, but I wondered whether it was possible to get a bit more information on home to school. I know that there was due to be a meeting in January to update all members, but that hasn't been able to be done. So would you be able to just give a small update to us on where we are with home to school and when members will next be involved? Because I remember when it happened in September and last September, there was a real this will be a priority for the council, and we'll give an update to members as soon as possible. So
absolutely, yeah. I'm waiting for the same meetings to happen that you're, I think, Councillor James. There has been some progress. I know there's been some there have been some meetings, and there's been a sort of action plan drawn up with the Integrated Transport Unit, which of course sits in our place directorate rather. And I know that they've done a deal of work on that, and they've also been in touch with our SEND team to look at how they can improve links with the team and sort of be more aware of students' needs and sort of issues that might come up. So there is work going on. Unfortunately, as I say, I'm waiting for the same sort of range of meetings to happen that you are, and I suspect that the transport team have been quite quite challenged to deliver those, but hopefully updates soon on those.
I wondered, Kenton, are you there? I wondered, Kenton, if you'd like to give any update on from your perspective.
Yeah, I certainly can. Obviously, there were a number of challenges around home to school transport that came out in September. We obviously actively raised those from a parent-carer perspective. We've had a number of meetings with the homeschool transport team, from the management through to those doing a bit more of the delivery end in terms of logistics. And we've certainly made a significant progress in terms of what I think it needs to look like. We just need to ensure that that is being put into place. Things like the electronic system for sort of, I suppose, scheduling and recording a lot of information and delivering communications to parent carers is all in sort of place. Provided it works, it could look a lot better next September. And I think we're just waiting for some of those reassurances from the homeschool transport team that hopefully very soon they can start bringing back to counsellors as well, in terms of just giving everybody a bit of reassurance that we won't have the same challenges that we faced last September, and pick that up. Is that sufficient?
Lovely. Thank you very much, Kenton.
Thank you both.
Really, thank you. Is that okay, Hugh?
Yes, that's good. Just to have that sort of small update is really helpful.
Thank you. And I think also,
Chair, may I make a suggestion? If we put a time, I was going to suggest if we put a time scale of being able to give a specific update to counsellors, would that be helpful? It might not have resolved the problem, as Kenton is suggesting, because obviously the priority at the moment is schools fully reopening. As Mike has quite rightly said, they've been open since March 20, but it is the fully reopening and testing, etc. So there's a lot of things people are all focused on, and I know that as we went through the lockdowns, Kenton, as you're aware, we had lots of dialogue to make sure the communications was much improved from what had happened at earlier, where it was a bit of a challenge. But I'm very happy to say that we will get an update to all counsellors to be very specific about the progress we've made so far and what we have still got to address, if that would be helpful.
That would be very, very helpful. Thank you very much.
If I could say that, I'll be available before the end of the month, if that's all right, before the end of March.
Yes, please. Thank you. Nicola, Mike has mentioned the Inclusion Summit, and I know that you also wondered about the Inclusion Summit and the next steps. So, Nicola, would you like to sort of pose your question? And
yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just reading about the Inclusion Summit that was held last year. I was just expecting to hear more detail about it. It sounds like it was a very, very interesting discussion.
I think it absolutely was. It was an opportunity for us to get together what is quite a disparate group of schools now. And as you probably aware, school leadership now is much more sort of disaggregated than it was in the old days. And sometimes it's, schools have sort of grown apart from each other. So it brought them back together into a sort of that collegiate sense of how do we work together to present an education system in North Somerset, which is coherent, works together and avoids exclusions and avoids parents feeling that they need to leave the formal education system to teach the children at home, which has been a growing issue, I think, nationally. And certainly, I think has been growing in North Somerset. So it was a chance for them to get together. It was also a chance for us to sort of reaffirm our role as Commissioner of Education in North Somerset, which is something which I think has sort of slipped off the radar a bit in recent times. But I think, with a new assistant director coming in, that's a fantastic opportunity also to sort of step that up and to provide not just the kind of the sort of the helpful role to schools to bring this together, but also a little challenge to them as well around standards and outcomes and inclusion. So the summit was really the start of that, I think, and schools have been working together quite effectively since, and we've seen some of the impacts there. Particularly in our secondary schools, we have inclusion panels which meet every couple of weeks to look at children who are at risk of perhaps falling out of school system. The secondary one has really sort of stepped up its work, and we've had some really excellent sort of joint working between some of our secondary schools, for instance. Some of that was there before, but since the panel, the Inclusion Summit, I think they've really begun to understand how each other work and really sort of effectively join up. We're hoping that will be replicated in the primary sort of sector too, but of course that's there's many more of the schools, so it's a bit more challenging. But yeah, very positive. It's the start of a journey, and I think the next step is that assistant director role. I think it's really important.
Thank you very much, Mike. Is that okay, Nicola?
Yes. I did have one other question regarding CAMS, but it can wait for everybody else because I know there's a build-up.
Yes, I'm going to bring that up certainly later on. Michelle, could you give me a list of the people who've put in the chat they want to ask questions?
We've got one question at the moment, Chairman, from Councillor Harley.
Is that the only person at the moment?
Well, that's going to take time, Chairman.
That's the only one at the moment, yes.
Hang on a minute, Anne. So there's only Anne in the chat wanting to ask a question.
Oh,
Caroline
James.
I didn't want to ask a question, Councillor. I don't want to take Councillor Harley's time, but just to add to what Mike said to feedback to Councillor Holland is that we had a follow-up meeting following the inclusion. We've had the first one because one of the commitments was inclusion, was trying to work together across all the SENCOs, which are special education needs coordinators that our schools will have, to try and kind of skill people up to be able to better support children and young people in mainstream. So there's been a subsequent follow-up meeting from the initial summit, and where they were sharing skills, sharing knowledge, sharing kind of ideas across North Somerset, academies and local authority maintained schools, to be able to support and work together, and also improve on the inclusion panels that Mike's saying, which are already quite robust, but everything can be improved on, and that includes the primary area too. So there has been that next step, and there is further more to be done, but that's just the update of what's happened since.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Harley, Anne, over to you. Anne?
Right, sorry, I didn't catch that. Well, they're going to be short, pithy questions, Chairman.
I want hundreds, Anne, because other people might want to ask questions. Perhaps 2 at the moment.
Well, it's all on the same thing, and it might be. I mean, 3 of them have gone out, but this is the only opportunity I have, and one of them I've actually taken up with Caroline James, which I will highlight as well. Quick question on the risks. I noted about the CAMS, and that's going to be addressed.
We're going to talk about that later, yeah.
Yes, exactly. About the anxiety about the EHCPs being seen as a last resort by schools. I want to know whether the BNSSG, which we had concerns about before, joining, whether North Somerset is getting exactly the same funding.
Right, we'll address that, Anne, in item 7 when we've got them with us. Okay?
Yeah, right, and whether we're getting any funding from central government regarding following the COVID, and also there's important to engage all parents and carers. I have some concerns about this because we're going to have, I think, a lot of backlash when the schools go back, as they are now, but when they're assessed, because some parents, and I found this when I was a governor of a school, that they do not accept that there is a problem with their child, and the schools notice it. And so therefore that's getting that message over to the parents that your child does need help, and how we cope with that. Have we got anything built in that we know there's going to be a problem and we can address it?
Right, thank you, Anne. Anne, wait a minute.
And then just finally, sorry, Chairman, but you know, I won't be coming back. And finally, I just want to know whether in the plan we will ensure. To me, that word will, I think, is wrong, because that actually, unless it's absolutely statutory, it's saying that we are going to do it. I think we should make it more softer than that, because we will be held to account on that.
So, Anne, let me summarise.
If you, that's fine, Wendy. But you know,
let me just summarise your questions. So, one was about CAMS, which we're going to talk about in item 7 with our health partners. One was about the word "we will," because you're worried about what that will mean. One is about communication with parents about their children in schools. Yes.
Well, yes, you haven't, but Chairman, you haven't addressed that. I said when they're coming into school now, or September, whenever they're coming in, new ones with children who could possibly present a case of SEND, but parents do not accept that their children have got any problem. It's not until it's picked up
Okay,
at the
I've got
school.
that. You had a question about the ECHPs.
Yep.
I think that is something that Mike can certainly address. And you had a question about the risk. There was a risk question. Anyway, I've got 4 questions from you, so let's go.
I'll have to.
So thank you, Anne. Let's go back to Mike then. ECHPs, Mike, would you like to expand on that? That certainly is an issue. I think, Caroline, Mike, communication with parents about their children that are going to school with SEN problems that may not be recognised, and that aspect that Anne talks about where, and I have to agree with Anne here, there's a lot of we wills in quite a number of the action plans, and I think there is an issue about what we will does mean. So over to you, Mike.
Okay, absolutely. I'll start, if I may, with the identification of needs in schools that Councillor Harley mentioned, and the fact that parents might not, sort of be engaged in that. I think all of our work around this has indicated to us that parents are recognising needs, and quite often demands on us are increasing as a result. So I'm confident that parents are telling us, when they need services, and also organisations like Parent Carer Forum that Kenton's here from, and Supportive Parents are very helpful in terms of helping parents to formulate those kind of questions to us, those challenges to us, and those requests for services. So I'm not too worried about parents not engaging with us. I think schools and our early years team, for instance, have some excellent sort of ways of sort of working with parents and children to detect some of these issues very early. Maisie, our sort of way of working with children in early years, is nationally regarded as a very strong way of identifying need, and then that transfer into school is managed really effectively through Maisie. And I think our primary school Senkos also are very adept at supporting parents. So whilst I recognise the concern, and I recognise the possibility, I'm not sure that's something we're seeing in North Somerset just at the moment. In terms of EHC plans, I think, there is the issue around sort of schools sort of tend to refer people in for EHC plans when they feel that it's a last resort and they're not managing very well. The Inclusion Summit and some of the joint working that Caroline mentioned is the way we've looked at addressing that. Skilling up schools to recognise need, to address need, and to be able to meet it by sharing their expertise is much more effective than trying to sort of pull children out of the system into a separate system, except where that's absolutely critical, and that's the only way of meeting the need. And I think, we've said in our education commissioning strategy that in North Somerset, we want children to go to a local school, to be educated in their community, and to grow up and become independent in that community. We want that to be the same for children with SEND. And in very, very few cases should it need to be different. So that's how we'd respond on that. The CAMS issue will come up with colleagues are here from BNSSG and from AWP, and also I'm sure that Anna is here, the contract manager from BNSSG, and she'll be able to talk about the parity of funding across the areas. I know we've seen some improvements and some changes in that score. Probably isn't finished yet, but we can cover that in item 7. Did I miss anything? It was quite a long question, Councillor Harley.
We will.
We wills, yeah. So generally speaking, the actions in the action plan are drawn from our statutory responsibilities. So we will is an absolutely sensible thing to write. I think also some of it is about commitments we've made to parents and carers, that we absolutely will do these things. And I think it's important that we are firm and we are sort of committed to those things. I think it's an action plan. It's one that, as I say, we're a year in, and I think we've made some progress on. I don't think there's anything that we haven't made any progress on, despite the circumstances. So I'm confident that where we've said we will, we will. I know that's awkward saying it again, but certainly we'll keep reviewing it and we'll keep coming back because I think it's important.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you for that, and thank you for answering Anne's various questions. Michelle, who's next?
Councillor Cherry, Chairman.
And then after that?
Councillor James and Councillor Cronley.
Thank you.
No longer one from me, sorry.
Sorry?
Sorry, just that mine had been, I already asked my question when you asked it.
Right. gone. Right, Councillor Cherry, Caroline, over to you.
Thank you very much. I read the Send Action Plan with great interest, and I can see that there's been a great deal of progress. But there was a reference to a lot of background information which wasn't actually on that. So I do hope that we as SIPs can be shown the co-production charter and also have some input on the children's sufficiency strategy. But my question is, in terms of how we improve access to our local offer, is I've seen that there's reference to online portals for obtaining EHCPs, and this has been trialled in other parts of the area. Could you tell me, is that what we're going to do, online EHCPs for parents?
Yeah. So, firstly, to pick up on the background documents, the Charter and Action Plan is published, and I can certainly make sure that Michelle sends a copy around to everyone. The Sufficiency Strategy, Caroline may want to comment on. It's a piece of work that's going on right now. So yeah, we'll explain a bit further about that. In terms of the online offer, the online EHCP portal is something that we committed to, and I think DFE are very committed to areas having too, because we're aware that the process of applying for an EHC plan is quite demanding on parents. It requires them to do quite a bit of work and input, and quite often to chase and challenge as well when progress isn't sort of clear. And of course, at the moment, they need to do that in office hours, 9 to 5, to phone our SEN team. And I think what's been really successful in other areas is having that ability to sort of log in at the time when a parent has some downtime to sort of think about what they want to write to us or what they want to put in their plan, to check on progress at their leisure, not at our sort of, times, and to be able to sort of very quickly see what feedback's come in from, say, health or from, education psychologists or so on. We've looked at a number of systems, and we're currently looking to identify the funding for it. But it is something that we're really committed to doing, because I think it will really improve the experience for parents. It ties into the local offer, and we've done a lot of work on the local offer with some support from the CCG and some external partners to look at the usability of it. And to look at how we can invest in making that more accessible to parents, and particularly to children and young people who we know want to use it, and to improve the quality and the coverage. So that work's underway. I've been doing that stuff, and it's been great fun to do. It's been really interesting to work with some outside people on that who have a totally different view of local authority websites to us, and it have really challenged us to think differently, I think. And yeah, it was a really interesting experience, and thanks to Deborah Oside and the CCG who set that up for us and got us in touch with them. I think, so Caroline may want to comment on the sufficiency strategy at this point.
Sorry, I wasn't coming off mute as quick as I wanted to. Just to say that the sufficiency strategy predominantly is around kind of having placements for children. So that would kind of come to the children in care and care leavers. But there is also the sufficiency. There's two aspects of sufficiency, and the one that's referenced in the SEND is about those school placements for children in terms of when the children needs to be in a residential school. And it's actually building in, because historically we hadn't joined up some of the commissioning lens kind of skills and scrutiny. So we are drafting up a document. It will, when you're asking about import, at the moment when it comes up to the draft, then it'll be shared around for people's contributions and comment on it. It is a statutory requirement that we have. So there's a smaller community from children with special educational needs that are not children in care, but obviously those children in care that will be addressed as well, and that includes their emotional health and wellbeing needs. So sometimes we place children in what we call 24-hour curriculum, which is effectively where their care, their education and their emotional health needs can be met in one environment, either in one particular situation or in kind of a linked situation, without going into details. But there is also the sufficiency of school placements. And as you know from the areas about that, that's an area of challenge, particularly around kind of the SEMH, the social, emotional and mental health needs young people. And that kind of goes back to the inclusion strategy and our vision for children, in that we want to try and keep children in school. We want to try and keep children in mainstream school with the right support, where that's right for the child, as opposed to alternative or external or out of the area, those kind of areas. So it's two-pronged approach, really. One is making sure only the right children we consider it elsewhere, and that will in effect address its own sufficiency, because less we're looking for elsewhere. So we're kind of bringing this in a very joined up, coherent manner and aligning the two, because I think, Councillor Cherry, you've asked questions about these areas being aligned, because they are very much aligned. You can't working in isolation, and I think historically we perhaps haven't done it as strong as we should, hence the SEND peer review, the outcome of the LJAR, etc. But I think we are on a journey to getting that right, but we've still got a ways to go. So hopefully that answers your question. But in terms of elected members to see that in a number of different committees that exist, including corporate parenting, scrutiny, and wider, then that will be shared and contributions welcomed for sure.
Great.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you. Is that answer your question, Caroline? Yes.
Just to be clear, so the online portals aren't actually here at the moment, are they? The online...
Not yet. No, they're not.
No, that's fine. That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you both. Kieran, sorry, Councillor Connolly, you have a question. Kieran?
Yeah, that's right. Kieran's right away. This one kind of fits between item 67, so I'll ask it now, but it's about the school mental health provision that was being bid for to go into schools, and it's, have we heard any further, and when is that likely to be operationalised by?
So is that something for this item, Mike, or should we move it on to when we've got our health partners here?
I think it's probably a question for Heather in item 7.
Right. It will be a question for Heather, but I think I would just answer is that it's not going to, when we were at the last scrutiny, we thought it was going to be sooner. There are reasons why there's a delay in it, and Heather will be able to explain that, and I can contribute as well if you want, but it's slowed down, but it's still happening. Simplest answer.
You're on my list, Kieran, for 5 minutes time. Anyone else have a question, Michelle?
Kenton Mee has asked a question, Chairman.
Of course. Yes, Kenton, please go ahead.
Thanks, Wendy. Yeah, I was just going to come in just to clarify on the local offer. Just one point to pick up is that it's the online portal to access information, and I think often out there it gets confused with actually what is on offer, and I think it's just a distinction that's worth making for everybody's understanding. In terms of Councillor Harley's question earlier, I think there is a real need to get the early identification working within all our settings, and there's a role for health within that in terms of ensuring that we identify need at the earliest possible opportunity to get support there. My question, though, a couple of points, but my question really, I think, would be helpful to sort of understand the Ascend action plan is obviously going to the Send board. That will go at the end of the month, and we'll pick that up. And we as a forum have a lot of input into that from a parent carer perspective and the development of that. I think historically, just before we were getting to COVID, we were perhaps a little bit frustrated that we hadn't got as far along getting all the actions completed as I think many of us would have liked. COVID obviously has presented a whole raft of other problems and challenges, but I think there is a question there in terms of what is the need for getting those actions happening now. We've got a real good, robust sort of list of actions that if we get them all into place will make a huge difference, that perhaps isn't the current experience of many parent carers. So I think there is a question there for both the offices at the local authority as well as health practitioners to perhaps ask that question or answer the question of what is the ask from the local authority to enable the delivery of the action plan, and also what is the ask of the health partners. So, you know, in terms of Mike, what do you need from health to be delivering to enable the action plan to be delivered? And it would be helpful later on if perhaps they answer it from what they need from the local authority. And I think, you know, in terms of the councillor scrutiny of everything, knowing what the asks are to make it happen would be really helpful. So I hope I haven't been too long on that, but
no, that's absolutely fine. So I think, as you suggested, Kenton, Mike, if you can perhaps say, what do we need from health? And then when we get on to the next item, Heather or someone can say, what does health need from us? So that's a good plan. So over to you, Mike.
It's a bit like relationship counselling, this, isn't it? I think, so for us, I think that there are several key things. I think, and we've talked a bit about the equality of sort of provision across the BNSSG footprint, and knowing that we're getting a service that's comparable and we're getting similar services across the piece. I think that's really important to us, knowing that, you know, we can access the same range of health input that colleagues in Bristol, South Gloucestershire can. That's really important to us. And I think that sort of that equivalence of funding, I'm not saying it's going to be equal funding because we recognise population differences, but that knowing that children in North Somerset have the same investment into their health needs as in other areas, that's key. I think CAMS is a significant area which impacts on a range of our services, children in care as well as children with SEND. And I think, you know, the fact that we've identified a lot of the children who we're getting perhaps not appropriate referrals for EHCPs for are actually suffering with anxiety or issues around sort of emotional well-being, mental health, and not accessing school. That indicates to me that there is a sort of an issue there, and I think that's a key one for lots and lots of children's services, not just SEND. So getting that right is absolutely critical. And I think the other thing we need, and you know, it's something we've seen some improvement on, is and colleagues here, I don't expect health colleagues here to comment on this, but consistency in terms of the leadership and the commitment to some of the strategic meetings from health sometimes has been a challenge for us. We've had lots of different people come in at lots of different times and sort of following some of the threads of work that have gone on. And Kenton, you've probably had this sort of similar thing from the forum's perspective. It's quite challenging sometimes to have the right people in the room at the right time to get a decision made. We've all got really arcane procedures to get our decisions made. We know that, you know, and we work in a local authority, so we suffer from that too sometimes. But I think it's been extra challenging around health. And sometimes we have plans and we have things we want to do together and commission jointly, but actually getting those done is quite difficult to do in that strategic climate. So those are my three asks. I'm sure anyone you ask in children's services will come up with three different ones, but those are mine.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike. And yes, we'll move this forward a few minutes to Heather and see what she comes back with. Michelle, have you anybody else in the chat?
No more questions, Chairman.
Right, just one from me then, Mike. Could I ask you about the shortfall of educational psychologists?
Absolutely. As you're probably aware, that was a contract that we have with Somerset County Council as part of their traded services arm. I think it was there was an underestimate in the number of EHC plans that they'd need to service in the year before last. We've done some projection work, which has informed the ask of them, and we've increased what we've contracted with them for last year and then this year again. So I think we have the appropriate amount in place now. It's starting to catch up, but for a while there, we were in a difficult position where we didn't have sufficient resource locally, and there was also a national shortage of educational psychologists. So even getting private ones in to sort of cover assessments was really challenging. And I think if you're a education psychologist in 2019-20, you could probably have, you know, written a blank check because people were all after you. We're in a much better position now.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you, Mike and Caroline, and thank you, everybody. I think we've done what we were supposed to do, what we were required to do, what we wanted to do. We've noted both reports, the SEND action plan and the peer review report. We've certainly looked at the risks and highlights, and I think we look forward to the next panel meeting when we can have an update on the SEND action plan and on hopefully the home to school transport as well. So thank you very much. Welcome to our health representatives. I can't see you. I can't see your faces because there's too many of us on the screen. But thank you very much for all of you for attending. So we have got Anna Norris from the BNSSG, I think Lorraine from Sirona. We've got Geraldine from Sirona and Heather from the Avon and Wiltshire Partnership Trust. We did get your slides. yesterday, I think, or the day before. Thank you for that. Would you like just to talk us through the slides that you've sent through, pick out anything that you think is key, and then perhaps you've already heard some of the questions that members have been asking about CAMS, particularly about children's services, about health offer for children, mental health, and for children's services. So, which one of you is going to start? Is it going to be you, Heather?
So, hi guys, it's Lorraine.
Lorraine.
So, hello everyone. First of all, I was half listening to some of your questions. I suppose being worried that I've imposed a little bit early on your meeting, so I was half listening. So you might have to remind me of some of those questions, that we can certainly get our heads together and give you a bit more of an informed update. So my name is Lorraine. I'm the Associate Director for Children's Services, and I started with Sirona 6 months ago now. So it's a delight to be here in front of you all today. And I think I know a few faces, which is nice. So I've already met Caroline this week at another meeting, and Kenton and I are working quite close together on lots of things. And actually tonight we are also meeting all the parent carers between 7 and 9 this evening in North Somerset, just to give them a bit of an update and a brief.
That's so good.
So my understanding, Wendy, that today was about you having an opportunity to kind of meet me and Anna, which is our contracts commissioning manager, and for me to kind of just describe what is going on in Sirona, BNSSG wide, and then we'll just give a verbal update on some of the key progress over the last couple of months and 12 months. Does that sound sensible?
That really does. I mean, I had written down that what we're keen to hear is your ambition for a better partnership with North Somerset Council, and your ambition for improved services for our children, especially our SEND children and young people. So what you've said is absolutely fine. Please go ahead.
Sure. Okay. Give me 1 second. It's difficult virtually when I don't get the energy from you all. So sorry that we're doing a little bit of half seeing each other physically, etc.
It's life.
It's so true. Would you like me to put up the slides?
I think that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Anna, would you be able to do that, Anna, for me?
Yeah, not a problem, Lorraine. Give me 1 second.
So this is Anna Norris. Anna, do you want to just introduce yourself, and then Heather can also do that as well? Would that be okay?
Yeah, that's not a problem. Thanks, Lorraine. Hi, everyone. So I'm Anna Norris. I work for Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire CCG. And my role is the contract manager, predominantly of children's community services within the CCG.
And Heather, do you want to just put your camera on and say hello to everyone too?
Yes, I will. I'm not sure you've got the camera on. Hello, good morning. I'm Heather.
Good morning.
Hello, I'm Heather Capellich. I am the Head of Operations for CAMS at AWP, and I cover North Somerset, Bristol, South Gloucestershire, and also the inpatient unit as well, based in Bristol.
And I do have an apology from Jerry. She's actually delivering to the Bristol parent carers as we speak. But is really happy to forward on any updates and details later, especially if we're going into a little bit more of the SEND and EHC detail. So I suppose my other plea is, if we leave today and you're still got questions and you're dissatisfied, if I haven't filled your bucket, so to speak, we can absolutely coordinate another one of these, and I really welcome this being a bit of a regular interface as well.
Great. I'll just put the slides up now, Lorraine. Can everyone see that?
Yes, thank you.
Right. There you go.
Okay, so it's a real an opportunity for me to share an introduction into the Children's Community Partnership, Health Partnership. I'm sorry, I'm working in actually Clevedon, so I'm in your part of the woods today. So somebody's just walked into the room. Sorry, Nikki, I'm presenting. Thank you. So very strange being in normal work. So the Community Children's Health Partnership represents, if you want to move to the next slide, Anna, I think that would be helpful. It talks about Sirona, AWP, and it talks about our responsibility with the CCG and the 3 local authorities. Now, I know some of you might have printed this out, but this is quite a complex diagram. And I suppose the benefit of this as a slide is probably just to give some insight into the complexity of the contractual landscape and the delivery relationships we have across Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire. And would you like me to go into a little bit of detail on that slide? Would that be helpful?
I think it would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. I'll pull out some of the key headliners. So obviously Sirona is the prime provider. So we are directly accountable to the CCG and the 3 local authorities about how we run children's community services. And within the umbrella of community children's services, we have our IMS and flu service, which is directly commissioned by NHS England. We have our public health nursing, which is 3 local authorities commissioning their public health, school nursing and health visiting services. Then we've also got the main cohort of our work around community paediatricians, our ASD pathway and all of our therapists. And then we've also got some other contracts alongside with Bristol Children's Hospital around the community children's safeguarding team and nursing team. We've also got our lifetime services, and then we also subcontract to Bonadas, who support us with that young people and youth engagement. So that and then we've also obviously got our mental health services that we subcontract to AWP. So it's quite a complex landscape of how we do business in children's services across BNSSG. And I suppose a real opportunity now for us to think BNSSG wide and really create that equitable, responsive service for all children, families and communities.
Did you get wet?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Wendy. I thought you were asking me a question there. Sorry. So it's important for us now as Sirona to deliver a BNSSG responsive wide service that are equitable for all young people, children and families to access. So strategically, we are looking at what we do well across the 3 areas. We're thinking about what we've learned from each other as we absorbed North Somerset. We are reviewing every service within the Children's Directorate at the moment, and then we are making sure that we respond to the needs of the local services, such as yourselves in North Somerset. So making sure that we're part of your plan in how we deliver health going forward. Is there any questions about that slide before I move on?
Michelle?
No questions at the moment, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, next slide, please, Anna. Anna, do you want to talk to this slide?
Yeah, I think this is just a smaller version of what we've just discussed, really, to really break it down, to show the commissioners across the services, how they flow through the contract, which is Children's Community Health Partnership, and then the providers that flow beneath it. It's more just a simplified version of the slide that Lorraine has just helpfully talked through, but I'm happy to take questions on this one too.
I think perhaps we can move on.
Yeah.
Okay, so since I have started, my responsibility to the Children and Family Board and Healthier Together was to develop a leadership strategic structure. And I've just completed that part of the reorganisation, and I've appointed to all of this new layer that you're seeing in front of me. So it is me sitting there as the Associate Director, and then I have created strategic leads that will sit across the whole BNSSG framework to really lead on those service reviews and make sure that we are delivering services within the geographies that is consistent and equitable across all the space that we serve. So I've got a head of public health nursing. I've got a head of children's services in therapies, autism and SEND. And I note from your earlier conversation that our SEND and EHC requirements are really crucial to get right across our 3 local authorities. And also the responsibilities for the head of children's services for therapies to ensure that we've got that kind of real true commitment and interface between education, health and local authority via our SEND partnerships. I've also got a head of specialists, and they will look at lifetime immunisations and our specialist nursing team, so our neurodevelopment, continence and children in care team. And also they're going to also look into transition, because we absolutely know that the start-stop for young people and I suppose some of the cliff edges need to be addressed in supporting young people move through into adult services. And then I've also just appointed a new clinical director as well, who's Lindsay McIntosh, and she supports me in the whole of the COMPEDS framework, supporting with some of the ASD requirements along with children in care and some of the EHC requirements. So I've got a really strong team from the 1st of April helping me coordinate and deliver as per our contractual and local authority expectations. Michelle, is there any questions? I just can't see.
Yes, Councillor Cherry's got a question.
Okay.
Hello, I'm very sorry. I tried to ask the question before we went on to the
no problem.
slides. Is the one back? But it's about AWP, because you've subcontracted. It's very difficult as part of SIPs to work out how we can scrutinise some of the performances of so many disparate partners. And one of the things that I was looking at, for example, was there's Couth and Off the Record. And I just wanted to know, because I can't work out how it happened, but who commissioned them, and how are these scrutinised? Because Couth is an American funded app, and I can't see how we work out its effectiveness. Off the Record is more open because it's a charity based in Bristol, and we'd be able to see the trustees. But the Couth app, just for example, I don't know how do we measure its performance?
That's a really good question.
Okay, so I'll begin to just describe the contractual responsibilities, if that's helpful. So ultimately, me, Sirona, is responsible for all of the prime, and I'm responsible to Anna in a contractual and commercial basis around the whole service offer. And within the prime responsibilities, I share that responsibility in a subcontracted way to AWP, and actually AWP subcontract Off the Record and Couth. So you're absolutely right in it's difficult to get your head around how all of this funnels down. Ultimately, I'm responsible for everything that's delivered in children's services. So the book does stop with me. However, there's a responsibility from a professional basis and a commercial basis that the scrutiny goes in a matrix. So there's a line of sight. So our commissioners have line of sight to all subcontractors in order to test and understand and I suppose review and reflect around service offers. Has that answered your question, Caroline?
So have you reviewed Couth, for example, and can you share with us what their performance has been?
Sure.
Like?
So
Because
Heather, I'm going to suggest that you come in here just around activity, if that's helpful.
Absolutely. Apologies, I don't obviously have the data in terms of Couth, but what I can say is that Couth is an online counselling provision, and they fundamentally have two offers. One is where you have access to, and they are all qualified children's counsellors. So, but it's actually carried out online. In terms of the performance indicators, there are a number of performance indicators that we measure Couth against. Some of them is actually, which is what we use for other counselling providers, is assuring us that young people meet a number of goals. And they set goals with young people, and we can check improvement against that. They also have quite a large library of resources and peer-led resources also available online that is moderated. So not unlike Off the Record, but the difference is the entire platform is online. But we do have, COOTH is an organisation that works nationally, as you know. In order to set up that, wherever they set up across the country, and I've worked with them in different parts of the country, they always have to have very close links with the local mental health providers and very clear mechanisms for escalating any concerns about young people, as well as safeguarding young people. But there are very detailed quarterly reports that are produced looking at their performance as part of this contract.
That's really helpful, because we don't know that, but we're just really lower down, but it's really important that we know that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Caroline. That was a really good question. Michelle, at this point, is there anybody else who would like a question?
Councillor Bridger as well, Chairman.
Over to you, Councillor Bridger. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I think Lorraine may have just answered my question in response to Councillor Cherry, but I was going to, I'm new to the panel, so, you know, a bit naive. I was going to ask Lorraine where children's mental health fitted into that structure that you've got there, because there's no separate sort of head of, but I think you were suggesting that essentially you manage that relationship directly with Avon and Wiltshire Mental Health Partnership.
Yeah, correct.
But, you know, given where we are with the pandemic and so on, obviously that's huge, isn't it? That area, that's a growth. That importance of that area has grown even in the last 12 months.
And a really good point, Steve. And I think as we get children back to school, we're going to be learning more and more about some of the challenges that we're going to be dealing with over the next 12 months. And we're really trying to get our heads together in making sure we're supporting schools and head teachers in what they need to keep children at school going forward. So in real time, having a responsive attitude and awareness to how we do this, because you're absolutely right, the children who are in need of crisis, there is something for them, and Heather will describe a little bit of that going forward. But it's the well kids that would have been okay, and that we need to make sure that we've got tools for the schools to kind of pull out and try and keep themselves well in order to deal with some of the challenges that children might be presenting. Heather, do you want to come in there and just talk a little bit about the kind of the mental health requirements and the CAMS requirements, and from a CAMS perspective?
That's a really good thing. Let's move forward to the CAMS slide. Over to you, Heather.
Okay, thank you. I just obviously really happy to take questions, but I wanted to describe our offer.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. Yes. Sorry to interrupt. We just had a question from Councillor Harley, I think, for the last presentation.
Is this about mental health, Anne?
Yes.
Right, should we move? We'll ask it after this slide then. We'll let
Sorry, I can't hear you.
We'll let Heather do this slide first, describe this to us, and then we'll come straight back to you about your question.
Okay, thank you. I just really wanted to tell you who's who in CAMS, because I think this is quite an important, very high level slide. So in terms of kind of key members of the team, if I start with, we do have an overarching clinical director, Sarah Jones, who also oversees a couple of our adult services, and an associate director for both CAMS and some of our adult provision as well. My role is head of operations, so I'm responsible for the day-to-day running of all the services, which I'll talk very briefly about on the left-hand part of the slide. And we have a clinical lead, Dr. Helen Stevens, who is also a consultant psychiatrist who works alongside myself. Locally in North Somerset, there is a clinical service manager, Katie Williams, who I know some of you would have met. So in terms of the service offer, we do provide specialist mental health support across those three areas. This slide covers the wider Bristol and North Somerset. So we have a specialist eating disorder pathway and provision. We provide substance misuse, but not within North Somerset. And obviously the youth offending offer sits within the local authority within North Somerset, but we have an offer in Bristol and South Gloucestershire. We have an urgent care team as well who provide support for young people who present in crisis and present at the hospitals as well. The other part which I talked about earlier on, we also provide the inpatient specialist CAMHS provision, which is primarily for Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire. The unit is closed at the moment for refurbishment, and we're offering a day provision, but that will be reopening with an increase in the number of beds in June. So I'm sorry, I've really galloped through that. I could say a lot more. I guess the things that I'd want to highlight, and then I'll come to questions in terms of North Somerset and improvement. So one of the first things that we did very early into the contract, moving across to AWP, was we introduced an electronic patient record. And that's been really fundamental in terms of actually having a very robust record and also monitoring and support of both the risks the young people present with and also our waiting list within North Somerset. We focused a lot on developing the workforce, and we are beginning to see new members of staff joining the team, and the team has been without substantive psychiatrists for quite some time. We've now appointed to our first substantive psychiatrist who starts in May, and we've got another ad out with some very good applicants, so we're delighted to be bringing in some of that stability. We've had investment in crisis as well, and so previously within North Somerset there was a very small crisis team, and we've had new investment, and that will be now we're undertaking a recruitment campaign, and that will be available 24/7 and 7 days a week, which will have a significant impact in terms of improvement that we can offer in the area. We've also, I don't know, Anna may want to say more, we will be introducing off the record. I'm sure some of you would have seen our briefing. So we'll have a similar offer to Bristol and South Gloucestershire, where we will offer that face-to-face counselling and wider resilience, particularly focused pre-specialist CAMHS. So we're really delighted, and we have a very strong working relationship with Off the Record. And the only other thing I'd want to add before questions, and I think there was a question about the mental health support teams in schools, and that was there was a whole process in terms of decision making and where the teams were placed. And I think for North Somerset, we won't have a team in North Somerset this year, but we very much wanted to introduce Off the Record and get that support into North Somerset over the next year, and have the mental health support team the following February. So, but we will have that pre-CAMHS support through the Off the Record contract during this year, and we're out to recruitment at the moment. So sorry, I know I've really galloped through that. Apologies.
Thank you very much. That's been very useful. If I could pick up on something that was asked earlier, there was a question asked of Mike about what does North Somerset want from you, and someone said, well, what do you want from North Somerset as a partnership? Would you like to answer that one?
I think one thing that would be really, and we're moving towards it, is to think in terms of the offer and the parity of the offer in North Somerset compared with Bristol and South Gloucestershire. I know that's quite an ambition, but that's something that the offer at the moment is quite different. I think there is something about how we come together within specialist CAMS. It's a very small resource. There is a really thinking about the model and the framework of delivery, and how as a partnership we can strengthen some of those relationships and pathways. And I think there's a real opportunity to do that alongside you, and I know that's already in place. I've got some very positive feedback from the service, so I think some of that, and we've covered that, I think, in some of the strategy as well going forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So over to you, Anne. I think you have a question.
Yes, I do, Chairman. Thank you. I want to pick up something that Councillor Bridges said. I mean, I have to tell you, one of my major concerns is the mental health. I can only speak from my own ward, and I know exactly how stressed out the children and the parents have been. They've had other issues, which has not helped. And what I'm hearing today, forgive me, is what we're going to do. I can quite understand that you are in a difficult situation, but the problem is we're all in a difficult situation, and I want to see, right, okay, we've got people that can deal with it now and get them through that crisis. You can't deal with everything, but a year down the line or somewhere like that, it's just not acceptable. This is children, adult mental health. So you've got the adult linked with the children as well. And this knock-on effect, I think, is going to, I hope I'm wrong, is going to blow up. And from what I'm experiencing in my own ward, that is precisely what is happening. And I would like to see something done and an urgency put into it. I don't care whether we have to go to the government or whatever, an urgency put into it, because it's not one fits all. You've got to identify and have those specialist people in there identifying something that if we don't do it, we're going to have consequences. And a year is too long.
Thank you, Anne. That's a really good question. And, you know, it links in with something I was going to ask. The Department of Services recently, what is going to be the input into children and adolescents' mental health in North Somerset, sort of now, because it is a real issue?
Sure, me too. I can answer that, and Anna may want to come in from a commissioning perspective as well. I mean, the first thing that I'd want to say is that currently at the moment, and certainly when AWP, when the service transferred to AWP, the service does still have quite a long waiting list. And that is something in terms of what we're doing now and how responsive we are, is really working very hard to redevelop the pathways to ensure that the children who do present in crisis are seen very quickly. And that's, you know, there has been focused investment there. I think there's a much bigger piece of work that we need to do locally with yourselves and also with our partners to think about, you know, what we do pre the specialist provision. So I don't disagree. We are seeing a lot more children presenting in terms of complexity and risk into the service. But I think there needs to be a refocus on what we can do much earlier in terms of that early intervention and prevention. That I think we need to think quite differently about, you know, what that support could look like. The mental health support teams in schools will be part of it. I think there are opportunities to think what we could be doing before they come into the specialist service as well. But part of what we're doing, you know, I could say, you know, yes, of course, we need new investment, and I'm confident, you know, that we're on a pathway for more investment. And COVID has absolutely highlighted the priority of children's mental health. We don't know the full impact. I know some of the young people who are coming through. Certainly, we may not have seen some of those young people pre-COVID. Certainly, in terms of, I know one of the councillors, apologies, I don't remember who talked about the increase in anxiety, and that's been quite significant. So we are investing in our specialist practitioners who are trained in the evidence to treat anxiety. And I'm if you like, I'm over recruiting in certain areas. We're over recruiting around supporting young people with an eating disorders, because that's another increased demand that we're seeing as well. So it's about, so some of what we're doing is about realigning the services and focusing some of that. But I think there's a real opportunity to think much earlier on in the pathway on how we can support, you know, both children and young people, families, carers, other agencies. So as a specialist provision, you know, and the new model, the iThrive model, is very much like, okay, how can we offer consultation? How can we come alongside you? Doesn't necessarily mean they need that specialist support, but there's a different way of doing it. So there's a lot of work to be done, but that's some of what we're doing. It's not just about, you know, some of the recruitment. We're really thinking about that pathway, and I think doing that in partnership is absolutely the way forward.
But Councillor Harley, Anne mentioned the need for now. I mean, I know that now can't happen, but what you're saying sounds really good for the future. But what about this year?
But we're doing that now. So at the moment, I have some additional fund. We've talked about off the record, and actually developing that model to work as a, if you like, a pre-CAM service that will go live in April, which has been a gap for North Somerset. Okay. And so we will be able to support a lot of young people in terms of resilience, mental health, you know, their mental health, lower level anxiety that doesn't need the specialist provision. But the pathway work is also critical. It is really, and we're doing that at the moment. So I've got a whole redesign project with some short-term new investment, for example, around eating disorders. I've just been given £500,000 to think, okay, what should that community offer look like across Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire? How can we support young people so they don't need to spend a long time in a specialist inpatient provision? So that's happening now.
I would just like to add, Heather, that was really brilliant to give a real high level specialist update. But I think I also want to lean in, Anne, to kind of answer really that nuts and bolts, is that mental health is everyone's business. And we're trying to raise that profile, that with parents, with schools, with people who have access to young people, so that they've got some of the tools to help deal with that. But absolutely essential, what Heather's talking about, is that there is a specialist within the areas where there's high level of need. So I hope we've answered that question for you, Anne and Wendy.
Thank you. Can I just come back on one thing?
No, Anne, there's a great long list of people who want to ask questions. I'll come back to you in a minute. Who's next then, Michelle?
Councillor Cronley's next, Chairman.
Councillor Cronley, Kieran.
Hi there. So you've mentioned obviously the things around access and parity to funding. So these are kind of the areas that I've probably got the most deep concern about, because no one wants to see North Somerset shortchanged in that respect. So the extra investment's great, and obviously that will help, but it probably won't cover our growing needs. So my two questions kind of linked to parity of funding really. So comparing us to South Gloucestershire and Bristol, how much per unit, you know, I know it's I do commissioning as a normal background, so how much per unit do we receive compared to Bristol and North Gloucester? And similarly with the waiting times, how do we compare with South Gloucester and Bristol?
Okay, I think the funding question, I don't know, Anna, do you want to answer that from a commissioning
yes, please, Heather. You can direct that to Anna. Thank you.
Yeah, so on the funding, I won't have the splits to hand, and we're working with North Somerset and with AWP to identify what the funding is in both the areas. Obviously, that it's been contracted very differently and commissioned very differently over the past few years, and now that it's moved across to AWP and to CAMS, into the Serona's contract, we do need to look at the funding available to all the services and to make sure that there is equity across the whole three areas, which includes obviously working very closely with the local authorities and public health, like we do in Bristol and South Gloucestershire as well, to just ensure that the way in which we're funding the services is equitable across the patch. So I'm sorry I can't provide more definitive answers around the funding now, but I'm happy to go away and come back to you on that.
Anna, I think it's really important to share that we absolutely, as a provider and commissioner, recognise that there is a gap in the service offer in North Somerset from a health perspective. And Kieran, you mentioned Bristol and South Gloss, and this is really, really important. So as Sirona, the provider, I've got to really make sure that as a result of North Somerset being part of my portfolio, that it doesn't dilute Bristol and South Gloss's service offer, and that we really work with North Somerset about the levelling up opportunity that needs to have happen. So whilst Anna, as the Commissioner, hasn't been able to give you pound signs, we're actually really trying to work with what is on offer in Bristol and South Gloss, say for example from a mental health perspective or a therapies perspective, and saying how does that compare in North Somerset and what do we need to do to get that up rather than dilute the offer.
Yeah, and just
to come here, and that's given you a bit of narrative.
Thanks, Lorraine. And I guess just to come on the back of that, absolutely, we want to look at levelling up the services, which is why we have committed additional funding to the CAMS services in North Somerset on a recurrent basis. So that's what Heather was talking about in terms of off the record. The CCG is committed to it, to funding that service for the lifetime of the contract, and that's in line with Bristol and South Gloucestershire. And we have committed additional funding around the other end of the pathway in terms of crisis services. So moving North Somerset from a 9 to 5 offering into a 24/7 model. So we're absolutely committed to ensuring that services are available in North Somerset in line with Bristol and South Gloucestershire, and then more so obviously for the need of North Somerset and the rest of our areas.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Kieran, at the moment?
It does. Just on the waiting time. Ours is longer, isn't it, than Bristol and South Gloucester? Is that yes or no?
It is longer. And I guess the thing that I'd want to say in terms of waiting lists, and I've been fortunate because I've worked in many parts of the country supporting CAM services in different roles, and I think the key success of some of the waiting list work that we've done both in Bristol and South Gloucestershire, and that we're now bringing that learning into North Somerset, is it's not just about us bringing in additional resources. That is part of it, but some of what I talked around the redesign and ensuring that young people are supported in the right pathway, and they don't go through many hoops to actually get the right if you like, the specialist provision, and that they're supported much earlier on where appropriate. So I think we will be bringing a lot of that learning. We're already doing that in some of how we're changing some of the systems and processes. And I think there's a real benefit for North Somerset because it is joining a much larger service where some of the transformation will be different. Of course it will in North Somerset, but there's a lot of learning that we'll also be bringing, and we're already doing within North Somerset.
Thank you. Kieran, is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine. That answers the question.
Thank you. Lisa, are you still with us or have you gone?
I think she's left now, Chairman.
I know, she suddenly said she wanted to, I knew she was leaving about now. Okay, Caroline, I think also you had a question. Caroline?
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. I listened very carefully to what you said, but I'm not getting the impression that North Somerset is getting access to CAMS services for this year, and instead we're going to get off the record, but they are still not even appointed. What I'm concerned about is that there is going to be a gap, and we as a local authority have statutory duties to provide adequate services, and I'm very concerned about the adequacy of our mental health provision. And I reiterate what Anne Harley said, that it's absolutely at a crisis point, because it's impacting specifically SEND pupils in particular, and there's huge need. So I don't accept that North Somerset can just be left out of the equation and be told to wait. I think it's a crisis, and I think that we need to have details about why. You can talk about levelling up, but it needs to be now. We can't have this gap because our children need it, and they're suicidal. It's extraordinary, the amount of need. And I know as well that CAMHS is spread out and that you're dealing with other patients from other parts of the southwest. It's not just North Somerset who are coming in and using your services. So please, please, can we have some real feedback and honesty about this, because there aren't appointments yet at Off the Record, and what my concern is that children are going to fall through the gap. Can you come back and tell us when CAMHS will be covering North Somerset?
So I'm happy to speak to that, Caroline. CAMHS services are available in North Somerset already. I think what we've been talking about is the services do require some pathway development and changes to kind of bring them in line with the way that Bristol and South Gloucestershire are running now that AWP are providing them. But CAMHS services are absolutely available to our North Somerset population. Heather, is there anything else you would like to add?
I think just to echo that, really, I think, you know, we absolutely are seeing young people in North Somerset. At the moment, you know, we are doing significant piece of work to reduce the wait times. We've put in additional practitioners now in terms of crisis. So I've already doubled that offer since April in terms of the staff who I have providing that support. And we've got a very large recruitment campaign, and we've had some very successful appointments joining the existing CAMHS team. So, but it's not a quick piece of work. So the transformation required within North Somerset, we're absolutely working on that now. But it's not something that will be quick. I do agree with you in terms of the pandemic. We are thinking about what additional services can come alongside to support young people alongside the specialist support as well. So that's something else we're doing.
Thank you for that, and I think we would look forward to some sort of feedback and report at our next CYPS panel meeting in June, because it would be very helpful, I think, for panel members. And over to you again.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I won't ask the question because Kieran actually answered my question about the cost. What I will want to know is this, and following on what Caroline said as well, I can't emphasize, I really cannot emphasize enough the problems with mental health. Yes, I understand Bristol and South Gloucestershire have got the same problem, but they're their problems. Ours are our problems. And I would say to you, Chairman, that when we amalgamated Bath, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire clinical commissioning group, this was the very concern that we all had, that North Somerset would be the poor relationship. And, you know, talking about further down the line, and this is happening, that's happening, look at what's going to happen in between, which is going to cost us and the parents and the children and everybody else a lot more.
I think we've had some reassurance from our health partners here, and I look forward to having an update, and perhaps some of you can attend our meeting in June, because the issue raised here are really important to us and to our children and young people. Were there any other questions, Michelle?
Chairman, we've got Councillor Gibbons, Councillor Holland, Councillor Pilgrim has put some questions in chat, and Councillor James.
So should we, Gibbons, Councillor Holland, keep going, and who else was it?
Councillor Pilgrim's put some questions in the chat, and Councillor James, Chairman.
I think Councillor Pilgrim's questions, I think our health partners can see those questions. If they could perhaps reply to you, Michelle, by email, then we can send them on to Councillor Pilgrim, on to Lisa. That would be really helpful. I don't want to lose anybody's questions. And before I go to everybody, I apologise that this is overrunning, but I feel it is so important. I knew that our meeting was going to be longer than 2 hours. I don't really apologise, because I think this is a serious agenda item. But if anyone needs to leave at 12 or 12:30, because we're still going, I understand. So, Councillor Gibbons, our executive member. Catherine.
Thank you. I wanted to backtrack to the last slide, and I note that you've got services. You specifically mention eating disorders and substance abuse. I just wonder if you could outline for us what, if any, specialist teams and advice you have for young people who are struggling in terms of anxiety over sexuality, sexual orientation and gender identity, because I work with a number of groups and I know that along with many other concerns, the pandemic has magnified these worries for young people. And I'm well aware of different charities and organisations that offer advice in this arena. I just wonder what you have in place and what pathways you would direct young people into, and whether that should be a specific area that's mentioned.
We do have a pathway for young people that we support within CAMS. We also have support from some of our national colleagues as well from London who will work alongside us to support young people in this area. So there is a pathway into CAMS to support young people, but we will also refer to some of the specialist pathways, particularly pathways offered in South London and Maudsley, will provide support, and obviously there are some charity supports as well who will work alongside.
Because I get reports from families and young people themselves with such issues that they aren't finding the support and the advice they need. They're finding it very, very hard. So perhaps that's something we could also look at.
We could certainly look at the pathway, and I know off the record also provide support alongside our services.
I think what's important to add there, Heather, is about creating a health awareness of those issues as well, Catherine, so that we signpost people, so that there's no wrong door, so that we make sure our health visitors understand it, that we we encourage parents to talk to us about it across the whole child health offer. And then where there is a child that's in need, and we also talk with teachers to try and get them to direct it, and therapists as well. And then when it gets to a level of need, of course, to create that specialist pathway, it's there. But I think, Catherine, what you're recognising is that some of the awareness isn't there around the kind of journey that young people take in those circumstances. Thank you for raising that.
I'm just wondering whether we could work more closely with the LGBTQ community in this area.
We actually, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we're really positive about, we are in the process of developing our new website as well, and wanting very much, there's been some work that's been in North Somerset as well as other areas, thinking about what we should have available, what advice and support we can have about all of our services. And absolutely, that's a critical part of our service provision.
Wendy, you're on mute.
Sorry, Chair. Oh.
On mute. Councillor Holland, are you there?
Hello, thank you very much, Chair. I've been working with children in various situations for years, and I have seen countless times children waiting for CAMS appointments. It has been going on for years. There have been years and years of emphasising early intervention being necessary. It's not a new phenomenon. What makes it different now? What makes the service different now that you're going to be offering? And you talked about, Heather, it's not necessarily a lack of resources. Maybe it's resources in the wrong place. And, well, you didn't say that, but you sort of seem to imply that. And so you're sort of realigning resources into different places to make the situation better. So you mentioned pre-CAMS. Is this like a triage system? You're shaking your head, right? Could you explain?
Sorry, do you want me to explain?
Can you explain what is different about what is going to be happening now? Because with the CAMS situation and the number of children who are needing urgent attention, strikes me that we're not hitting the early intervention goals that we want to be hitting. And it has been talked about for years. So why have we not managed it before, and why are we going to manage it now?
I think it's quite difficult to talk about sort of the historical issues within North Somerset. I think what I would say is that it's absolutely well recognised that children's mental health is a key priority, and there is absolutely a need for increased investment in children's mental health, both in the specialist pathway but also early intervention. So I hope what I haven't, apologies if I've said that actually we have this right at the moment. I think we are making improvements. I think within North Somerset there absolutely is the need to think about children's early emotional well-being support, mental health support pre the specialist, and actually having some of those services available. Off the record will absolutely be a starting point for that. I think there's more that could be done. I think there's more investment absolutely within schools, of which the mental health support teams will be part of that for that group of young people, for those pathways, particularly around young people with anxiety and or behavioural problems. I think that the specialist provision, what we need to do is make sure that young people are seen as quickly as possible, and particularly those young people who present in risk. So what we have done is we have completely, so in the specialist services, we have changed the triage system. We are reviewing, so young people are reviewed every day. Young children who are on the waiting list are telephoned. We have a very robust RAG rating system for risk. We have increased the crisis provision within the North Somerset team. So some of those things are very tangible things that we've done at the moment, but absolutely, you know, having more investment within the services. But the pathway redesign is really important as well. I know I've talked a lot about that. It is about ensuring that children have the right support, whether that's the right specialist support. So the triage is critical, really understanding, you know, what are the issues that are presenting, having a really comprehensive assessment of that young person, and then actually getting the support to the right pathway. That's really critical, and that's the work that we're doing at the moment. We are emphasising that support around some of the more high-risk young people at the moment, and that's where the emphasis has been, but that needs to be across all of our pathways.
Thank you very much for that. I'm just going to go to Kieran, and anybody else who has questions, could I ask you to put them in the chat so that perhaps our health partners can respond to them later. But I'm going to draw this to a close now with Councillor Connolly, Kieran, because we have been talking. Let me just tell you that Councillor Connolly Kieran is chair of HOSP, and we've been talking about putting together a joint working group just to look at CAMS, and we're hoping that our health partners will join this working group. Kieran, would you like to explain a bit more about our thinking?
Yeah, and just to say, I think Michelle was going to say Steve Hogg's on the list. So yeah,
I want to move this on after you. So Steve,
that's
can
fine.
you just put your question in the chat and we'll answer it at a later date.
And Councillor James, Chairman, as well.
And the same, please, because I'm very aware that we need to move on to some items on the agenda. So any questions after Kieran has spoken, please put your questions in the chat, and I'd like to ask our health partners if they would answer it either in the chat or in an email to Michelle. Is that okay? Thank you. Kieran, over to you. So
just to explain, so obviously, I think you mentioned at the start, Lorraine, where you said actually you're kind of interested in if there's more information we need to share it. In effect, I'm summarising what you said, but in effect that's what it was. And I'm kind of hearing from councillors, whether it be on the health panel that I chair or here on SIPs, that the parity of funding seems to be something that's cropping up quite a lot. So I'm thinking of, should we set up I suppose an investigatory working group is probably the best description of it, until June SIPs, so that's what, 3 months, if that, to get some idea around the parity of funding. What is the difference between us and everybody else? But I would add on to that the access issues to the service. So you're talking about service redesign, pathway redesign, whatever we call it, whatever business we're in, we're talking about service redesign. So a working group to pick up both of those, but we would need support from obviously our health partners, because we ourselves as councillors won't have any of the data to understand what are the funding differences between us and say Bristol, and I don't have enough expertise to understand about service redesign. So if you're happy to engage with us on that, I think that's a good way to take this forward.
So would you be happy to engage with us?
Of course, of course. In order to get this right, fit for now and fit for the future, co-production involves you alongside our parent carers, alongside our wider stakeholders. So absolutely, it makes total sense.
So could I ask if there are members on this panel here who would be interested in joining the working group? So that's Hugh. Who else would be interested in? Caroline, Anne, and Steve Hogg? No news. So I've got Anne, Caroline, and Hugh. Was there anybody else who would be interested and has the time?
So Caroline James would like to speak as well, Chairman.
Sorry?
Caroline James would like to speak in relation to this.
In relation to this. So can I reiterate, before we move on, can I say a huge thank you to our health partners? Absolutely a huge thank you for coming along. I know we've taken an awful lot of your time, but this is a really important part of our work. And I'm really pleased that you're willing, Lindsay, to engage in us with this working group, because I think moving forward, that's going to be extremely valuable. And we can report back to the next CYPS meeting in June of how our work has gone. Caroline, you want to round up this?
Sorry, I wasn't trying to speak. I was trying to just help you by putting in the chat. Did you want an officer membership? And if you do, I'll make sure you get the right membership. That's all.
Yes, please.
Sorry, I put it in the chat. It was a misunderstanding.
And I didn't have a question, Wendy. I've made a comment, but it's an important one that I'd appreciate if people could read. And also, I'm happy to join the working group.
You are. Lovely.
Yeah.
Thanks very much indeed. And I think, Kieran, you're going to see which people will come along from your panel.
Well, I mean, technically 6 of us on this panel are HOSP anyway, and you've picked up 2 of them, and me, so that's 3.
Oh, that's good. And Ruth, you're on the panel as well. Lovely. Well, thank you everybody for your contribution to this particular item on the agenda. Thank you to our health, thank you to members. We are obviously showing our concern. We are obviously showing a real ambition to move forward on this and get it better. So thank you to everybody for your contribution. And as I say, I'm really sorry we overrun, but it's just too important not to move on, not to address it.
Chairman,
okay.
CCG are happy to be part of the working group as well. They've just put that comment in chat.
Oh, lovely, Michelle. Oh, it's sounding so positive. Thank you so much. And the next item is me. It'll take 30 seconds because we have a forward plan, and the workings of the Task and Finish group is all highlighted in our forward plan in section 1. It gives the reason for the scrutiny, it gives the method, it gives the timeline, it gives the progress. It also is in section 2, where we've talked about what we have worked with and how we've worked with our LGA peer mentor. But it also talks about the meeting next week on March the 17th, where we are having a separate members briefing for this panel on the children's improvement plan following our Ofsted. So I do encourage all of you, if you possibly can, to come along to attend that meeting on March the 17th. It will be really good for everybody to hear, not just the small working group, the recent progress on the improvement plan. So please put March the 17th, no, is it? Yes, March the 17th, 4 o'clock in your calendars. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on then, Caroline, Corporate Parenting Update Report. Can I first of all say we have had some really good briefings for councillors on corporate parenting, because all district councillors on the council are corporate parents, not just us. So it's been really good that some other members, apart from CYPS members, have been attending the briefings. We have got another briefing next week, the week after, on the 24th, again, which I hope members of the panel and other members will be able to attend. But over to you, Caroline.
Okay, I'll go very briefly through this because I'm conscious of everybody's time and you've all had opportunity to read it. I think what I'd say is that we have been, for all members, an introduction to children and young people's service, so you understand what our world is, and also corporate parenting. And then the request of Councillor Bilgrim, who's now left the meeting, is I'm purchasing, there's a bit of a paucity about it, but I'm purchasing corporate parenting kind of editions of how to be and what it means for all members of the corporate parenting panel. So that's in train at the moment. So I hope to be able to deliver them to you fairly quickly. So just in summary to this report, there are some aspects of performance information in here that I might pick up here that when I actually talk of performance later on, I won't duplicate everything. But I think just to explain, and in our realignment of children's services, which you're familiar, I referred to before, which concluded mid-February, and we took effect from the 1st of March, we have renamed our area that covers corporate parenting. So Amanda is now called Head of Corporate Parenting, and that is to try and refresh, emphasise and not forget that corporate parenting, and that covers children care, care leavers and the fostering kind of placement side of everything. And just to alter feedback in that through realignment and consultation that's also taken place, the children's commissioning will be moving over to children's services and differentiate between adults, and that will be taking place in the next few weeks. That'll be implemented in the next few weeks as staff have kind of finished in that consultation, which will help us very much in terms of our sufficiency area, because that team will be part of children's services as opposed to linked to. So simply on there that we've now, as compared to the last time we met at Scrutiny, we talked about the Q1 data and we've now got Q3. Unfortunately, the timing of that meeting meant we didn't have Q2 data at that time. But we have, at the end of Q3, 221 children, and the numbers have slightly gone down on that currently. Of those children, we are at around 51% per 10,000 children, which is actually lower than our statistical neighbour of 53 in England of 67. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing. It does mean that we're able to support, align with our visions, children and families, to support them to remain at home or within their family network, as opposed to become children in care. So it's not necessarily a bad thing of that. So when you're lower or above your statistical neighbours in England average, it makes you ask questions of yourself as opposed to assuming that's a problem. We have been changing quite a lot of the practice to that, to basically try and make sure that we identify children much earlier, so where there are issues, so we can try and call them, work with them to remain safely and securely at home, or where that's not safe and secure for them, bring them into local authority care quicker, and also make sure that we address permanency better and faster, because permanency means either going back home and not being in the public care, or on the converse side of that could be adoption, so outside public care, and there's a number of ranges in there. So you'll remember back in Q1 we had 12 unaccompanied asylum seekers. At the end of Q3 we had 15. We now have 18 because we joined in with the national challenges with our colleagues in Kent, where the numbers were getting unmanageable for that particular local authority, where children were arriving in the UK as unaccompanied asylum seekers. We do have challenges in North Somerset in terms of language, culture and identity, but we are making sure that we plan those children in their best interest. So we have more children of those unaccompanied asylum children. They tend to be older children, 16 plus, but some of them are under 16. Again, most of the reasons why children coming into our care is because they've experienced abuse or neglect, and the neglect can come through domestic abuse. So some of you know about the numbers of domestic abuse, but it might be through domestic abuse they're being neglected. It also could be emotional abuse or physical abuse. I think the other area which is about performance is that 3/4 of our children at the end of Q3 live in foster carers, either within our own in-house children, foster carers, or outside. That's really important to know. And I am slowly going through those numbers because I know from a scrutiny committee that's areas you're frustrating. Sorry, is somebody asking me a question?
Anne, could you turn your mic off, please?
Yeah, thanks.
Could you turn your mic off, please, Anne?
Sorry?
Could you turn your mic off? Thank you. Caroline, do carry on.
No worries. I think also that we are increasing the number of children that live in North Somerset. So whether that's, because obviously close to home is better for the children in the majority of cases. There are some children who it's safer and better for the children to be out of the area. Or potentially go to live with extended family members. So that might be a better thing. So it's not all children, but obviously we'd like to do that. And we're now at 65%, which is in the same period last year, we were 58. Not huge numbers, but if you take the number of children that we're talking about, that's a positive. We've got issues in terms of health assessment and dental checks. Some of that is impacted by COVID. Our colleagues from health have gone. But you'll know through corporate parenting panel you'll have heard is that there was a period in time that dentists were not allowed to be open, and then when they did open, they obviously had to take some of the priority children. So we're working nationally and locally on that issue to try and make sure that these vulnerable children, because sometimes neglected children can have major dental issues, particularly younger children. So it's not where it needs to be, but be assured it's partly COVID related and partly as I say, a national issue. I think the other thing too is special guardianship. Some of you will know through the learning is that as an introduction of a type of order that came in quite a number of years ago, and that was considered that actually for some children adoption wasn't the right plan because of their kinship kind of relationship that they were going to go on to be adopted. So special guardianship orders came in, and initially I think that there was a thinking they would be for older children, but actually it's across the age range, and that also is where the new carer has the child living with them, but they share parental responsibility with the birth parent, whereas with adoption that doesn't happen. The other thing that's really an improvement on from Q1, it's still not anywhere near where we want it to be, but those young people, care leavers in education, employment and training, we are 2% above Q1. So we've got 44%. And we are working both across our partnership as part of the Children's Improvement Journey, as well as all the initiatives that some are in this report. We're working across the partnership with schools, with Further Education College, with our education and skills colleagues, with the local authority, and with our health colleagues to try and see how can we resolve this, because this isn't just for care leavers, this is for our children in North Somerset, and you're a scrutiny committee looking about children in North Somerset, not just care leavers. So we haven't cracked the problem, but there's a real wish to do that, and we've also just joined in some research with the University of Oxford and the University of York with 5 other local authorities, where we hope to gain some learning from this, is about looking at what the barriers are. So there's some, and they are very, as you would know, well-regarded universities, very experienced in this level of research, to help us see what are the barriers to getting employment. And also, it also addresses that area of temporary employment or zero contract, which a lot of our care leavers, unfortunately, that's as far as they can go because of their educational areas. And that's not healthy for them, and that's not right to get him into the permanent employment. So there's working there. So kind of referred to permanency, that's an area, if you remember in the Children's Improvement, we got challenged in Ofsted in March 20, is that we didn't match permanency for children whose care plans were long-term fostering quick enough. So children, if they don't know that's where they're going to be until they're adults, and leave home like children who live with their families, whatever age is the right age to leave, then actually that's unsettling for them. It affects their emotional health, which we've had long conversations about. It also means that sometimes they will act out to check out whether or not you know, this is going to be permanent for them. So we've introduced lots of better systems on that, both inherent with computer systems, but also at what we call a tracking system, and joining things up, because everybody was doing their own thing. And all those young people that referred to there is an action that we are virtually completed. I believe it was going to be the end of March. I've got a member of my staff who sadly has had to be off for a few weeks, but is due back the week after next. I've kept things going, but it's been a bit difficult. But certainly in the next month or so, we should have been able to match those children that were waiting. You don't just say yes, you have to go through panels, formalities, and we are celebrating. So we're giving them a celebration to acknowledge as if a child was adopted, because it's permanency. It's a very important area. Missing children, again, that's an area, part of the children improvement journey. We haven't got it right. We're working on contextual safeguarding. It's a very key area. We are just undertaking a survey using Children's Society survey with our police colleagues and the local authority to do what we call a self-evaluation. Where are we as compared to the rest of the world? That's kind of in train as I talk. We are also setting up a much more robust monitoring of children missing from home, from care and school through our front door, because as you'll know, we've refreshed our front door to try and get strength about that. But what we're trying to report on that is a little bit more helpfully to people to understand. So in Q1, we talked about 116 episodes. Episodes are missing. So that could be somebody didn't come home when they were supposed to. It could be somebody, you know, who is supposed to be staying in because of COVID and goes out. It could be somebody who is more worryingly is missing over 24 hours and we don't know where they are. We're starting to draw that together so we can better report on that. But we had 116 episodes with 48 children, 18 of them being children in care in Q1, and we had 103 episodes with 56 children with 20 children in care in the area. So there's less episodes, but there are more children. Yeah, so we really need to unpick what we need to do about that. And this robust operational system I put in place, which I've worked with elsewhere before I came here, is very effective because it looks at both the individual children and what we've got to do, but it also looks at the strategic aspect about what we need to do to disrupt, what we need to do more of. Is it training? Is it awareness, the kind of stuff you're talking about or whatever? So hopefully that'll understand. We've had long conversations about emotional well-being. We have a consult service, which is partly funded by ourselves, partly funded by our CCG partners. That does work with children, young people, but CAMS and what that continuum of need, that's the description I would use, which is, right from the acute specialist, which is what CAMS is, down through to kind of the awareness and as problems emerge. It's not where it needs to be. We've had those long conversations. I won't repeat that. But I did want to say that a local Somerset-based company called Painted Horse, who provides equine therapy, and there's a lot of research that this is very impactful, particularly around children in care. So basically, they've got a grant to support 30 children, young people in care, and we've been offered a minimum of 20 of those places. I can tell you from working with equine therapy in the past, it's been very impactful because if you think about it, they work with elderly in care homes in this way. Having those horses or their dogs or something or other, sometimes people are able to express their emotions and feelings better. The other thing, some of you were a part of our Children in Care Awards ceremony, which we had to do a little bit different this year because of our regulations and guidance, because of the pandemic we're in, so that it was done virtually. I think for those who are aware, the feedback we had, the young people enjoyed it, foster carers, and I guess an advantage was we were able to invite more young people who perhaps live out of the area that couldn't come when it was kind of face to face. So I think there's a learning from us going forward in the future years as how we get that balance right. But we worked with Theatre Orchard, and there was a lot of interactive. At the moment, I'm just trying to see if I can get permission for that video to be shared with all of you. Obviously, there's children, young people in there. As you can see, that when we're on virtual, it has people's names. So there are some issues about kind of security around that. So that's what I'm hoping to do to be able to show you. We've talked about sufficiency for foster carers. I think what we The positive is we have more children in our in-house foster placements than we did before, which is a real positive. And we also have more children. So we have Q1, we had 62%, and then I just said we had the 3 quarters, so 75%, 74% of children in foster care, and then in-house foster carers in Q1 it was 34%. It's 37% in Q3. So again, we're in the right direction, but not perhaps at the pace we need. We also have more children in North Somerset, as I've said. We are recruiting, and we have 18 new foster carers coming into play this year, and part of that is as bedding in a marketing skilled person in our fostering team, who works across the health, across the schools, and does a lot of work. So we've been able to enhance that, and as you know, in our sufficiency strategy I've talked about before, at the last one, we're looking to develop the range of in-house foster placements we have, so we can hold some of those much more complex young people rather than placing them in independent fostering or residential when that's not really their need. It's just because we don't have a foster carer locally can take them, but we need the support of our CAMS colleagues and our health colleagues in that, because if we're going to wrap around those children locally, we need to wrap around them with a support package. So there's lots of conversations going on about that, because that's very hard to do without that.
Caroline,
am I going too slowly?
No, I'm hoping that everybody has read your report.
So shall I just open it to questions then? Would that be more helpful?
No. Could you just highlight rather than tell us what we should have already read? Could you just highlight some parts of your report from the sort of supported independent, which is some extra information that isn't in this report?
Okay, so
you've done that with some of the other sections, and it's been really helpful.
Okay, so just to say it is in this report, but I want to emphasise is that young people have referred to mental health and emotional support as a real issue for them, as you have. Yeah. So they've asked for peer mentoring. So that's for older children in care and care leavers. So I have promised them we will do that, and we're looking at it, but we've got to do it right. We've got to do it so we don't duplicate what's in there, and we do this in a safe way for young people. So we are doing that at the moment. And the other thing, we are progressing in the realignment. We moved participation under one section. I've got a vacant head of service at the moment that I'm recruiting to, and in that area, which looks about quality assurance, looks across the whole service, it's where the independent reviewing officers sit, etc. Participation will be led in there, and that will ensure that we look at participation and the co-working with our young people across the piece, as opposed to focusing on just children in care and care leavers, because I think that's been something that we've perhaps lost an opportunity there. And as you know, that I'm looking to offer to one of our care leavers a young director's position, and that's going through its due process to create at the moment. I think the area that I've just talked to you about, the research that's not in there with the University of Oxford, I've just talked to you about the group with the wider partners that we are doing. We are also with Reboot, we are looking to extend, that's the social impact bond, working with trauma-informed young care leavers working across the west of England. We're looking to extend that to 2024 and make a bid for that so that we can get more young people. And that would be an additional 20 North Somerset children care leavers. And it's been quite successful, so we're putting the bid in there. I think the other last area on corporate parenthood I would want to say is that we are being much more joined up now, working with our schools, our health and our police colleagues than we have done, and I don't think that draws that out in the report. So I will stop there and just take any questions.
I just to highlight what children see as their key issues, one of them of course is mental health and emotional support, which we've been talking about all morning really, and it's been picked up by the children. If I can open to questions, I know Steve, you were keen to come in and ask something.
Yeah, it's just a general. So thanks for that, Caroline. It's a long list of things that's happening, and that's all great. This probably predates your tenure at North Somerset, but I remember just under a year ago, where lots of members were invited to a very lengthy call one evening. I think it took a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours in duration, where we went through just how central the role is and the importance of the role of being a corporate parent. And it was very much reinforced to us as new counsellors, particularly, how seriously we should take our role as corporate parents, and we should be thinking about not just about scrutinising work that's being undertaken by officers, but also offering support that we could share from our years of experience in business or whatever else there may be that we could offer. And a great number of us, including myself and several other people on this call, spent quite a lot of time on that call and took those words seriously and submitted quite lengthy lists of things. I mean, I've submitted a big long list of things that I would really like to help with. And the thing, we're talking about mental health, I would have already been able to help with had I been taken up on the offer. But sadly, nobody ever came back to me. And I did raise it with at full council with Catherine, with Councillor Gibbons as well. And I was reassured that somebody would sort of take it up and see that it happened, but nothing has ever happened. And we sort of sit here, we talk about the serious role that we have as corporate parents, and we talk about the issues that the pandemic has had on children's mental health, and in particular in care leavers. And I just keep thinking about that big list of things that I offered, and I think it's really disappointing that nobody's come back to me to take me up on any of those things. Those offers are still there, but I think it's just really sad. And I think, as I say, there are other people on the call now who will feel similarly about it. So can we please, can we do something about those offers that were made? And if we need to resubmit, and if it's not the right thing to do, then tell us, and we can stand down. But there's certainly a load of skills that I've got and a lot of opportunities that I could offer that might make a difference to a few people.
Catherine, could I ask you to come in here, because I know you collated the list, didn't you?
I didn't collate the list. It was it was Helen Caldwell.
Okay.
Right. But I know that Carol Ann and I have had a number of conversations about this. I'm disappointed to hear that you haven't had any response, Steve, but I know, and Carol Ann will probably come in as well, that the pandemic has affected an awful lot of what we could progress in terms of supporting our care leavers, particularly. It's quite a complex issue dealing with young people online or on calls, and it has to be kind of carefully moderated, I suppose. But I know we have gone forward with 1 or 2 of the offers, particularly from Councillor Cato, and I'm guessing, and Carol Ann will come in, I'm sure, that the team is kind of going through what they can push forward. Let's hope that as we gradually ease out of lockdown and we can have more contact, easier contact with people, that things can happen. Carol Ann, do you have something to add?
Well,
we've talked about this at length, haven't we?
We have, and Councillor Hogg, I actually am aware of a couple in corporate parenting panel that I passed on, but I will apologise that exactly what you say is, if there is a reason why not, then why you don't get the feedback, and that's a criticism. Kenton's on the call, and he's on the call, and he'll know that that's the biggest complaint of children, young people and parents, is that there are sometimes we can't do things because of parity, or the young people don't particularly want it, or how do we do it fairly to them, or whatever. That may have been the reason. I'm not going to presume it is or it isn't, I don't know. What I can do is I can get that list from Helen. It's not a problem. I'll get that list. What I will do, if you don't mind, I will share that around to the people who've put their names on that list to make sure the offers are still there. I wouldn't make the presumption. And then also, if anyone else wants to add anything to that list, and then what I will do is meet with my heads of service through my corporate leadership team, determine what their views are about using it. And then what I will do is set up a meeting with the councillors who made the offers and be straight with them to say, this is really great, we want to go forward, this is how we're planning to do it, and this is what we're going to do, or we need to talk to the young people about this, or whatever the issues are, or actually we can't do anything about this and this is our reasons why. That feels to me, And I can promise you that I can do that over the next, it's now, what day we are looking on, the 11th of March. So I can get that list and I can share it around with you before the end of March. And then at some point in April or May, but if the holidays means that it's just problem trying to get a date in the diary, annual commitments, then I'll set a meeting up with you to go through what we're going to do about that list. Would that seem a fair solution? And you have my word, it will happen.
No, please, Caroline, don't think I'm not sort of saying it's for you, necessarily for you to do. I mean, I think my view is, why aren't you using us? You've got 50 counsellors with hundreds of years of experience in industry and all kinds of skills that we could offer. It's low-hanging fruit, and if there are some roadblocks about, I don't really buy that yes, the pandemic's affected it, but I could have given a lot of online support, and I'm CRB checked. There would have been a way. There is a way. So let's just make it happen. Let's breathe some energy into it, use us and allow us. We were told that we needed to think about our corporate parenting duty. We should be thinking about these looked after children as if they were our own children. So I'm offering support. I've got my own kids have been saddled with me for the last 6 months, and I want to be able to help. I want to be able to discharge that responsibility as a corporate parent. And at the moment, I think I'm being a bad dad because I'm not being given the opportunity to do some of those things. So yeah, if it's not appropriate, if it's not suitable, tell me and I'll stop wittering on about it. But let's try and do something. We've got a ton of stuff we could be doing.
I think
Thank you very much, Steve.
Yes. Yeah, thanks, Steve. I was just going to say, I think, and Carol Ann's alluded to it, the thing we always have to remember is that it's very much driven by what the young people want.
Yeah, sure.
And with consultation with them. So that's
I understand that. And I totally understand that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Michelle, who's in the chat?
Councillor Jacobs and Councillor Harley, I think. Yes, yeah. Councillor Jacobs and Councillor Harley.
Okay, Councillor Jacobs, Ruth, over to you.
What I wanted to say is I very much agree with what Councillor Hogg said, because I wrote, when the list came out, to both Catherine and to Sheila Smith at the time, and said that I have expertise on being on adoption panels for many years, and if there was anything I can do to help, because some of the things that we're saying here were not actually what panel members were agreeing with. That's when I was doing it, and maybe I can help, but nobody replied to me. And when that happens, you think to yourself, why should I bother? I think like Councillor Hogg, I have certain expertise. Why shouldn't we use them?
I think Carol Ann has assured us that something's going to move on this. So hopefully you'll be contacted as well.
Fine. Well done.
And Councillor Harley, Anne, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, I agree with both the previous speakers. We've all got talents and we can use. What I want to pick up actually is this, and Carol Ann or somebody alluded to it. Yes, we're talking about our looked after children here and as corporate parents, and I also want to address the fact that we're also talking about our other children, who could come into care. And I think in some cases our education system does not suit everybody, and that's a concern I have. And I think that what we should be doing, which probably would address it, is we should be using our expertise. I don't know how we will do it, but actually to identify those children who are in schools, or even the children who are looked after now. What are their skills? What are they good at? Are they good at art? Are they good at anything? The artisans, pick out what they're good at and bolster them up and ensure that we're guiding them into the right direction for them to move forward. And there's plenty of opportunities. As Steve quite rightly said, we've all got connections where we can use those skills into even outside and guide them into where they need to go, like another Banksy in the world or something like that. These are the sort of things that we should be doing, and not just leaving it, expecting everybody to pick it up. that I really feel quite passionate about that. So that doesn't only affect our children who are in care, but also across the spectrum, because there are a lot of children who are not being used and identifying their skills. Quite frankly, that's according to me. Now, can I just also ask Carol Ann about the missing children? Just a good comment on that. The missing children, when they're found and they come back in, are we actually conducting interviews with them to ensure the reasons why they left? And that's important. And then about the asylum children, are we actually, do we interview them to see, because they were coming in through Bristol Airport, quite a few of them, do we interview them to see, identify where they come from, any contacts with where they've come from, and any relations, and also any looking at possible trafficking?
Thank you very much, Anne. So, Caroline, I think there's 3 questions there. My battery's dying. If I disappear, it's because my battery has died and I've got to go somewhere else to come in. But anyway,
Okay.
3 questions. One about, are we making sure we look at our children's skills, especially our look after children? Are asylum seekers interviewed and details found out from where they've come from and so on? And do you ask missing children why they've gone missing?
Okay, we have a statutory responsibility for every child in care and also every child in education. So every child is to understand their needs and their wishes. So yes, we have a very strong system in place, and independent reviewers and officers oversee that because they oversee children in care plans, and child protection coordinators do for children there, and through social workers. So you have plans that are reviewed by management, and supervisions and monitoring. So there's a lot of systems of overseeing that. Not all perfect. We're not an outstanding authority yet, but we'll get there. And we would look at those. In terms of your question, I think was about the wider use of some of the counsellors to be able to support those. More than happy to do that in the proviso of all the things I just talked about. So yes, we do look at them, and yes, we will do that, because you're absolutely right. You might have the next Banksy, and I can think of a very simple example of a young person would have never done a GCSE, would have never finished education, but ended up getting an A-level, A-star a few years ago in art, and went on and got a contract with publishing. So, and he was in prison. So yes, you can do that. And yes, I think we do that. I think missing children, again, we have a duty under a statute requirement that the first thing is called a welfare check by the police. They do, and then we do a return home interview. And that is trying to understand. And going back to what I was saying about the missing children bit and the operational changes that we're bringing in to strengthen what we currently do, that will be looking at all of those areas, whatever they tell us, because we will be looking at exploitation issues, their vulnerabilities, are there child protection issues in there or not? Return home interviews at the moment, the take up for young people isn't as strong as it needs to be, but we offer those, and that's 2, children in care and children missing from home. So it doesn't matter if a child's in our care or not. Police will always do a welfare call, and we will do a return home interview or a try. So again, I'm working on that area of return home interviews to try and see if I can expand it. Unaccompanied asylum seekers, there is a duty to assess these young people, which is part of its an age assessment, parts an assessment of their needs, and they are skilled and robust. And yes, it addresses, do they have family in here? Are they being trafficked? All of those areas are explored. Honestly, sometimes we don't always get the truth, and sometimes young people go missing very quickly after they're in our care. Not all of the children are children who arrived in through the airport. Some of them have come through the Godano service station, and some of them have come through the Kent cohort that I've talked about. And we work with them very closely. When they're in placement, they have an allocated worker, and that allocated worker will develop a relationship with the foster carer as well if they're in foster placements, or the supported independence if that's where they're placed, who will help to understand their needs. We always look to see if we can make contact with their family internally or in their country of origin. We have to do that in a safe way for them, because some of them are very vulnerable. If the Red Cross approaches that family, there could be risks to their family and to them. So that's all done in a very secure and safe way. And we also work with them to see if they're exploited. We have a group of young people, you'll see in the report of corporate parenting, have gone on and accessed emotional and mental health and some education areas. So we've got some good areas there, but that's why we're a bit careful about who we try and select here, because some of the inner cities that we don't have, and Bristol doesn't have, for some of those really trauma skilled areas, we don't have them in North Somerset. So we need to make sure that we're going to be good corporate parents to those young people.
Thank you very much.
I think I've answered your questions, Councillor Harley.
Thank you very much, Carol Ann. Can I reiterate to everybody that we have our next corporate parent meeting on the 24th of March. So if as many people as possible can attend, that would be good. It's 5:30, I think, on the 24th of March. And obviously it's open to all members, but certainly it would be very good if our CYPS panel members could attend. Thank you very much, Carol Ann, for that really detailed analysis of what we're doing for our corporate parenting. Moving on to item 10, I will say, Steve Hogg, that I'm trying desperately to get my iPad to power up, and no lead seems to be working. So if I disappear, Steve, you're in charge. Okay?
Okay, fine. Meeting will be closed.
Oh, I don't know about that. Welcome, Catherine. Thank you. It's really good that you're going to be able to talk to us a bit about the budget. Over to you.
Thank you. Right. Gosh, we've had a lot of very detailed discussions on areas that I would have touched on. I think, you know, Carol Ann's gone into a lot of the detail around corporate parenting, about where we are spending the money, the extra money, because thankfully in this budget we haven't seen cuts in children's services, nor would we. I have to say, in terms of the national budget, I think we were all disappointed to note that children were not specifically mentioned in the Chancellor's recent budget. However, we are doing our best, and I thought, given that the time has run on, I'll try to be brief, that I would just focus on where we're spending the additional £150,000 that has been put into children's services this year. Obviously, much of it is to support all the work around our children's improvement plan, but as colleagues will know, the members of the exec have to identify a few short-term priorities that they have for this money, which is essentially a one-off uplift for this year. And I've obviously identified working with our children in care, and Carol Ann has talked about it in greater detail in the report. We are going to press ahead with the Mockingbird project and create another constellation, because it's been an incredibly successful programme, just offering that kind of support network to foster carers. It just seems such an obvious thing, doesn't it, to do, and it has worked incredibly well. We're going on supporting our marketing people in the foster care team to get more people to foster, and I think the emphasis we put on it during the pandemic to kind of streamline the process of approving foster carers has worked really well, and we have managed to recruit extra people. So that's an area we're continuing to spend money on. For me, one of the big priorities was the work we're doing around our children's centres. I mean, thankfully, North Somerset has never closed a children's centre per se. And what we're doing now is putting money into 3 of our children's centres to transform them into family hubs. So some of that money we've got will go towards making the environment more attractive, more accessible to families with older children, and encourage them to engage with the services available there. I mean, I was just going to mention something that it's particularly exciting to me. Those of you who know me will know that I go on about this quite a lot, but it is, I'm hoping that we will have some kind of relationship with a movement that's developing in Western at the moment. That is to create food clubs. And I'm hoping, and our representatives from children's centres have attended the steering group meeting. So the idea is that we will be able to work with Food Share, Fair Share, and a couple of other agencies within North Somerset to locate food clubs in some of our children's centres. And this has worked particularly well in places like Bristol. And what it does, yes, it addresses food poverty. That isn't its main purpose, though. Its main purpose is to address food waste. And it gives the opportunity to families to pay a very small subscription fee, and enables them then to shop at the food club and to buy a minimum of £20 worth of food for £3 a month. And also quite often access free vegetables that might come from allotments which can't sell their excess, and all sorts of other things. And above all, it develops, I think, a community feeling around food, around sharing recipes, around talking about health and nutrition. And when you consider the issues we have around childhood obesity, I think that's incredibly important. Some of you may have noticed in the press only today that 2 children from a good, stable family home were taken into care because of their morbidly obese status, and their health was at risk. So, you know, I feel that this kind of cooperation will be very, very helpful, and I hope it goes ahead. But that's just one area where our developing our children's centres into something wider can tie into other elements of what's going on in the community and benefit everybody. What else are we spending our money on? Of course, Carol Ann again has talked about it at greater detail, but one of the main priorities we've identified is addressing the barriers our care leavers have to getting into employment, education or training. And we've set aside a smallish amount of money in the budget to put towards a dedicated programme, not just of mentoring, but we are going to be and are working very closely with the economy team, because my portfolio also includes skills, which sits with place and the economy team. And I know that Carol Ann will be having conversations with Jane Harrison to see how we can tie these two things together, the money we have in children's services with some money we have around addressing skills and targeting our care leavers particularly in that. I think we can safely say that we should be able to create a dedicated programme of mentoring, careers advice, careers support for our young people, and to hopefully give them that feeling of aspiration that we have for them, to translate that into their own aspirations. And this will tie into a lot of the work we're going to be doing around the skills agenda generally. We have a consultation that will be coming forward, and we're hoping to do that first with our care leavers so that they'll get like a first crack at the bite of the cherry, as it were, in terms of articulating what they feel they want from their lives, what they feel they want from us, and what skills they feel they need to achieve that.
Thank you very much, Catherine.
I won't go on any longer.
Could I suggest to members that if they have any questions about what you've said, or any more questions about the budget, that they send you an email to ask you the question, then you can reply to them individually. Not if that's okay. I don't want you to feel I'm shutting you off. But
no, that's fine. I've got another meeting anyway. So
yeah. Right. Oh, sorry. I should imagine some of you have. Thank you very much. It was very, very useful. Catherine, do you want to highlight anything particular in the months 9, the budget monitor? Catherine, are you still there, or have you left us?
No, I'm still here, but obviously very conscious of your time. So I won't make any comments if you don't feel that we've got the time to do that, but I'm obviously happy to take questions either now or for people to send me an email. I guess the only thing I would say was that it's an improving position. So this is the month 9 report that you see. Actually, we've already done work on month 10, which suggests that it's an improving position. So I'm hopeful that we'll get closer to a balanced budget as we get towards the year end. The only thing I would say, Catherine, is I was really pleased when the budget came out for next year. I as you know, I was expecting huge cuts, and I'm sure Catherine knew I was expecting this. But in fact, the budget cuts for our children's services isn't actually budget cuts. It's hoped for savings for the future, and hoped for savings is much better than seeing a huge budget cut in the service. And I'm sure that everyone's going to try and work towards those hoped for savings. So I was really pleased at that positive look at the budget for children's services, as opposed to that very negative aspect that it could have been. Just to add to that, because I think it's a good point, really. So in the sense that there's growth actually in the children's services budget for next year, some of those that Councillor Gibbons has described, but also kind of technical growth to reflect the demand in the area. And as you say, the savings, that they're more than hoped for savings, actually. There are savings that we are absolutely committed to delivering. But you're right, they're not cuts. They are efficiency savings. There are things that we would want to do. They're the right thing to do. They're about getting more appropriate and local placements for looked after children, for example. So, you know, they're the right things to do, and they will save the council money, as well as being good for young people too. So would our members happy to send Catherine questions? Does that seem a good way forward? Because otherwise I'm very conscious that other people are going to have meetings at 12:30, 1 o'clock, and I don't want to cut anybody off. But obviously Catherine is quite accessible via email. So does that seem a good way forward? Thank you, Catherine. I feel quite positive about the budget next year. Perhaps I shouldn't, but I do. Caroline, we've got your performance monitoring. You've alluded to various things already. Was there anything else that you wanted to highlight, or again, questions to you from members if they want to?
I would propose questions from members. The only thing that I just wanted to show, there will be a slightly different format. I referred to that last time. Yeah. There is a change. If you've read the two together, you'll see this is different this time, but I'm trying to do it in a more simplified form that I think is more helpful. We're working on that with the Children's Improvement Board. We're not quite there, but we're nearly there. And then when that happens, because this will be a subset of that. So I'm more than happy to take any questions either in the chat or send to me email, and I'll answer them. I've focused on quite a lot of the key ones. I think the only thing I would just want to say is that there is a real anxiety about further demand, which links to what Catherine says. And the honest answer is we don't know. We all think there may be a stronger demand that come as schools fully reopen and we go through the pathway of learning to live with COVID as the future, as we do with flu and other things. We don't know. But what we do know is if we've got capacity at the moment, and if we need more capacity, then we're just going to have to provide for that. So there may be more children in care, there may be not, because of what we've all gone through in the last year, but we're all worried, we don't know, but we're prepared for it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, and so questions to Caroline in the chat, or if you would prefer via email.
Yes, sorry,
sorry, Anne, can we put questions in the chat, please, or via email? Because I'm conscious that other people have got meetings to go to. Okay, would you like to email Caroline, please? The panel's work plan.
Chairman, this is a nonsense.
I've already mentioned that all the work of the Task and Finish group is in there. So I don't think I could see anything in the work plan that needed particular highlighting. So if everyone's happy, I think we'll call the meeting to a close. Does that seem a good way forward? Everyone happy?
Chairman.
And
thank you, Chair.
Who's got meetings to go to? Is it a very quick question? Very, very quick.
No, don't bother. Don't bother.
Okay, thank you. Put it in an email, Anne. Put it in an email. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Our 2 items on send have been absolutely fantastic, and especially having our health partners there. Thank you so much for being so patient with me, for allowing it to overrun, but I think it's been really important. So thank you very much, everybody, and thank you to the officers and to Anne Hartley for being here with us. Thank you very much, and goodbye.